From Righteous to Villain. Chapter 61. Brewing. I had cleared the back kitchen table before Lyra even asked after we got back home. She didn't say anything, but throughout the whole way, I could tell she was suddenly inspired. Was it the old man? Most likely, although I couldn't really comprehend much from his insane ramblings. "Can we help?" a voice asked as the kids came down from upstairs. "I don't think so." I chuckled, looking at them. "She isn't baking today, but if you want to help..." I looked at their eager faces. Well, they have been stuck in here for a time now, and with all the rumors going around, it should be fine. "Listen, we are going to do something important, and it is best if nobody disturbs us. Go outside and make sure the area is secure, "Yes," they all answered, including Mira, which was a pleasant surprise. "So," I looked at Lyra after the kids were gone. "What can I do?" "I don't know yet," she muttered, looking over the ingredients, furrowing her brows. She stood over the table, her sleeves rolled up, hair already tied back in a knot. "I think I will go as the book described it first." "You sure you want to start immediately?" I asked, leaning on the nearby counter, watching her face from the side. "Yes, I am." She nodded but didn't look up at me. She was eyeing the dried twigs of spice laid out beside the bowl that the old crazy gave her. Lyra's eyes were going back and forth between the ingredients, her lips moving, probably counting or playing out the steps in her mind before speaking again. "If I wait, I'll keep hesitating," she shrugged, shaking her head, expelling her doubts. "Better to get the first failure out of the way." "Well," I smiled despite myself, "that's very optimistic." "Huh." She did glance at me then, offering a little grin in answer. "It's how you learn, right? Burn the sugar, ruin the foam, boil the wrong root," or how he said it. Something like that, although Brannick probably burnt more than some ingredients because his mind is not all there. "Hopefully by the end I won't become like him because of inhaling something nasty," she said with a small laugh. "That man's brain is a swamp. I am not aiming to replicate his achievements." "True, I do hope so," I chuckled. "Still, as far as I can see, you understood him." She didn't answer right away, blushing. "I just think I get what he was trying to say." With that, she picked up the spice and sniffed it carefully. Then, to my mild horror, she licked the edge of the stem. "That necessary?" I asked, as it wasn't even washed. "You taste flour when you're trying to figure out if it's spoiled." "Fair point." I raised a hand, giving up. "I don't know how to bake or cook, so..." "You are the boss in the kitchen." "Of course I am," she frowned, but not because of me. "This batch is a bit dry, probably a day or two too old. It should have been stored with a moist cloth." She added to herself, then, flipping through the manual, she kept mumbling, "Book says to use a pinch of this. But if it's dry, I should increase it. Slightly." "Please don't become like that hermit," I muttered as Brannick's voice echoed in my skull. "Pinch his memory." "Bah." Still, Lyra didn't measure it, nor did she weigh it. She held the spice between her fingers, judging it the way she might have judged nutmeg or crushed rosemary before adding it to her latest creation. So it wasn't surprising that she dropped it into the bowl and stirred it slowly with the carved wooden spoon we'd been given. She reached for the second ingredient, a powdered root whose name I couldn't pronounce, and that looked a lot like dried ground cinnamon. I say looked, because by smell it was closer to spoiled curry. Blee. Yet here I was, watching as she sniffed it, pinched it, then hesitated. "What is it?" I asked, seeing her hand stop. "Just..." She looked at me, her eyes moving back and forth, thinking. "This powder's fresh and is still warm in places. I think if I use too much, it'll overpower the spice, might not activate properly." "So, less," I offered, as at least some logic I can follow, not being utterly hopeless. Pursing her lips, she nodded, adjusting the ratio on the fly, and I saw it, right there in the motion of her hands and the narrowing of her eyes after the fifth ingredient. By then she wasn't second-guessing herself. She knew something was off and modified the sixth accordingly. True enough, she didn't need numbers or perfect measures, she just felt it, balancing the measurements according to the changes she made. It reminded me of the way she usually baked. The way she could spot a dough that was too soft before it ever rose, or the way she could tell a glaze was wrong by its sheen, not its taste. Maybe she was a natural, and this wasn't just intuition, but being a latent genius in potion making. Still, I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to jinx it. I learned that it is better to keep things to yourself instead of blabbering and drawing in some prankster god to turn something good into something bad. Sometimes, when she asked for a utensil, a new ingredient, or just to flip the book while her hands were full, I was there, helping. She added a spoonful of thick, clear liquid from one of the vials next to her left. The moment it hit the powder mix, the substance in the nasty-looking bowl hissed and smoked like hot water spilled on an active stove. Hearing it, Lyra stirred gently, not too fast, folding the contents the way you might do with whipped cream. Watching her work, she frowned again. Too hot, I guessed. Too quick, she explained, the reaction's unstable. Should we stop? No. She shook her head. It's too late for that. Maybe I can save it. Might as well see it through. As she said it, the smell that hit my nose next was odd. Not bad, but not good either. It was a bit sharp, closer to, like wet tree bark left out in the sun too long. It had an earthy and sour aftertaste at the back of your tongue. The mixture had turned a dull purple-grey as I looked, sludgy and bubbling with small, irregular pops. Yet, continuing to work, she grabbed a clean dropper from the table and pulled a few drops of the liquid into a glass vial. The rest she stirred again, and when it stopped bubbling, she left it to settle, folding her arms and leaning against the table. Well, I asked, lost as to whether it was good or not. If the book is right, it's supposed to turn pale green with a velvet-like surface, she replied flatly. In a few minutes. I peeked into the bowl. Yours looks like spoiled jam. Exactly. She shrugged, shaking her head. As we waited, a long moment passed. Nothing. Yeah, this was not it, and she knew, so she sat down with a heavy sigh, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. I messed up the sequencing, she pouted, going over it in her mind. I should have added the water part more slowly, or mixed the dessert longer. Maybe both. Dessert? I chuckled, sitting down next to her and patting her head. You still figured out how the ingredients reacted, I said, pointing at the table. That's more than nothing, especially for being the first attempt. More than a lot of first-time brewers, I'd bet, she said, giggling, back to a good mood. I can feel what I did wrong. That's the odd part. It's like when I bake. You don't know exactly why something fails at first, but you remember the texture, the moment when you need it, the feel of the mixture on your spoon. Next time, you don't make the same mistake. Look, she leaned over at the book and nodded to herself. I didn't understand that line in the second half about trusting the memory of the hand until now. So, I tried, so Brannick was right. Maybe he is more than we guessed. I don't know that, as I never heard an alchemist going insane. Not from the money they make. She gave me a flat look. But he wasn't wrong. For a brief minute, we just both stared at the failed potion for a bit longer. What's up with the part you put away? I asked suddenly. I bottled it to know which variant is a failure. As for this, she picked up the dropper and stared at the murky liquid inside it, thoughtful. Should I throw it out? She asked, looking at me, unsure what to do. Well, I don't know. You really want to keep a sample of that? I don't know, she shrugged. It might be useful in the future. Compare it to the next batch. I'll label it as first failure. A memento. By all means, I chuckled. Maybe spoiled jam is catchier. I'll think about it, she nodded, smiling again. Good. I reached across the table and brushed a bit of powder off her cheek. You're glowing, you know. I'm sweating, she corrected, wiping her brow, making an even bigger mess of her face. That still counts. She laughed, giving a peck on my lips, and then stood up again, clearing the tools before retying her hair. I could tell that she was already thinking about her next attempt. I could tell from the way her gaze lingered on the next batch of ingredients I was preparing for her, and from the faint crease forming at her brow. I think I get what Brannick meant, she said, more to herself than to me. It's not about formulas. It's about learning to see. See what? The changes that no paper formula can predict, she said, biting her lips. The difference between flour and sugar. It is not enough that they're both white powders. It is the same here. The way a potion smells 5 seconds after it's mixed, it needs a bit of memory and probably a lot of experience. I didn't say anything to that, but it made sense. When she started over, I just watched her work. There was something satisfying in watching her work like this, step by step, methodically. Even if it was a failed attempt at first and not instantly successful, I wasn't disheartened, and neither was she. Honestly speaking, I would have been more concerned if she had managed to nail it instantly. It would be weird. The sun had begun going down since her first attempt. I'd expected her to call it a day soon. Fail one more time, take the lesson as it is, and then try again tomorrow. That's what I assumed anyone would do, but Lyra wasn't just anyone, it turns out. Her sleeves were still rolled back up, even tighter this time, while her hair was in its fifth knot. Much messier and still damp from where she'd splashed water on her face to go at it one more time. She hadn't said a word since bottling the spoiled jam number 4 sample, but I could read it in her body. There was a subtle stiffness in her spine, the way her eyes kept flicking to the next set of ingredients. She was at her limits, but I didn't speak. I just leaned against the counter and stayed out of her way, watching. I know how it is when someone is in the zone. Disturbing them is the most annoying thing possible. Let them work, and they will stop when they want to. This time around, she started slower than in any of her other attempts. She picked up the same dry spice and rolled it between her fingers. Instead of crushing it outright, she set it under a damp cloth for a few minutes, and then she crushed it, nodding at the much better results than from before. Moisture retention, she muttered finally, makes the aromatic oils inside of it release more slowly. Next came the root powder she screwed up in the third attempt. This time she cut the amount in half and stirred it gently into a cool mixture first. If I recall right, it was something to do with stabilizing the reaction. Something worked as there was less smoke this time, with no audible bubbling and no violent reactions. Craning my neck, the bowl didn't look impressive from where I was. In fact, it was utterly boring. The thing inside of it looked pale grey, thick, but not sludgy. As it settled, the surface turned smooth and reflective for a moment, which was weird. Then, when it settled, came the distilling part, the boiling and control of the flame, which one time made the vial shatter. That was a scare, but now it went without issues. When she finished, a spoonful of liquid emerged at the end. She took the vial, careful not to shake it up, and then smelled it. "Nothing," she whispered. "Good or bad?" I asked, stepping closer. "Very good." Her lips curved into a satisfied little smile. Next, she dipped the end of a thin rod into the mixture and pulled it out. The droplet on it slid off clean, with no residue or stickiness at all. It was acting more like water now. This is what the book described. It said the final result should have no odor. Stable, even color of light gray with a smooth finish. And this has all of that? Yes. Well then, I said, straightening up, looks like spoiled jam has competition. Congratulations. Ah ha ha ha, I did it, she yelled out, almost dropping the vial. With a laugh, she corked it and put it down, jumping onto me and giving me a deep, delighted kiss, which I returned happily, holding her waist. "So, what does the first potion you made actually do?" I asked, after she finally calmed down a little. Well, she turned around, looking at it. "Supposedly, it boosts potency." "Of what?" Suddenly she was blushing, averting her eyes, and that was enough to make me realize. "No way. You brew an aphrodisiac." I don't know." She pouted, her happiness turning into sudden shame, which was funny to see, and I couldn't help but laugh. "It isn't funny." "It is," I cackled, still hugging her from behind, rubbing her tummy. "What a rascal." "Ugh. But why isn't it pink? Or sweet-smelling?" I asked, making her pout even more. "Wouldn't that make it too obvious? This one is." "Damn. Is it to roofie others' drinks?" I gasped. "Roof? What?" "Never mind," I mumbled, shaking my head. "Let's put it away before one of the kids thinks it's a drink for them." Chapter 62. A Wild Effect. The little vial stood on the kitchen table like a treasure from some ancient ruin that 100 adventurers went to get, but only one returned with it. Then it turns out, It was already spoiled. Lyra had cleaned the bottle's edges, sealed it with wax, and even labeled it with a "do not touch poison" warning, mainly for the kids. Anyway, I didn't know what I expected the first potion she made to look like. Explosive, glowing, actually poisonous. A perfect healing potion. It was neither, and it was for sure not as colorful as the ones I saw. Nor did it have any smell. This one looked like rainwater with a faint grey tint. Dirty rainwater. Utterly boring. And ridiculous. Why were we making something like this? Why was it even in the old book? Did Brannick know it from the ingredients? I had so many questions. It's still just liquid, I muttered, sitting across the table. But it's a potion, Lyra said, correcting me automatically, ecstatic about accomplishing it. But then she sighed too. Sorry. When I saw the first receipt and felt I could do it, I totally didn't read what it was for. And by then, you began buying the ingredients, and it would have been a waste to throw them out. I am not blaming you, I grinned. I am just gobsmacked, that's all. Such a potent little drink. But we don't know if it's effective, she mumbled, blushing. Well, let's find out. I stood up, reaching for the vial. Auriel. Her voice snapped like a whip at me, followed by her hand actually slapping mine away from the potion. I froze mid-reach, surprised by the strength of her voice. Yes? You are not drinking it. I wasn't going to drink it, I lied, because I was totally about to take a swing of it. Why? I just remembered how it felt drinking those potions before a fight. The feeling was addictive. Tsk, damn. I need to be careful with this shit, especially after remembering what it did with Lyra's dad. I was just going to dab it on my tongue, see if it burn, or something. You're not a lab rat, she continued, her look still strict. Could be. No. Okay. I sat back down, defeated. It's just a drop. But sure. It's a drop of something I brewed from ingredients we barely understand, using a method passed down by a book and through the instructions of a madman. True, I nodded, thinking that over, but I'm curious, and I know you are too. So am I. Yes. But unlike you, I'd prefer we don't accidentally poison the man who keeps a roof over our heads. She blushed. I am not ready to become a widow. Well, that is fair. And what is this about being a widow? Wait, does this mean… Oh, well, whoa. Not that I'm complaining, though. Let's do it the safe way, Lyra continued, missing that I was a bit lost in thought as she tapped the wax seal with her nail. We need to test it, yes, but not on ourselves. I don't have a target to bring over, I added jokingly, making her roll her eyes. I meant that we need something small and manageable. Something that can show effects without putting anyone at risk and wouldn't be a big deal if it dies. So, I exhaled slowly, considering the parameters. A rat. Yes, she snapped her fingers, suddenly enlightened. That's what alchemists usually test on, isn't it? I guess. If they have a lab and a bunch of caged rats, maybe, I muttered, thinking how it was in my previous life. We have an abundance of them anyway. Catching one shouldn't be hard. We have the kids do it, she said, standing to find them. They have been holed up for a long time. A bit of exercising sounds fun. I agree, she grinned, heading upstairs. A few minutes later, the little troop we had was lined up at the door, each wearing the same expression, ready for a mission, including Mira, who wasn't showing any hesitation to head out once again. Of course, I wasn't going to let them wander alone, so we separated them into two-man groups. Find us 2 healthy rats, I said, keeping my voice steady like I was making a routine grocery request. Living ones. Yes, Puck cheered, fists raised, saluting by slapping his chest. No problem, boss. Try not to kill them or poison them. We need healthy ones, Lyra added, raising a stern finger. And not ones with missing limbs, I added, and look out for bites. Can I catch a big one? Puck asked with bright eyes. Will the biggest one be rewarded? Sure, why not? I shrugged, and that was apparently all the motivation the kids needed, looking like hamsters on caffeine overdose. Come back fast, Lyra called after them when they were let loose in the city, and don't forget, don't get bit. The door slammed shut behind them like a gunshot. I don't think they heard her, so we both stood still for a second, unsure if what we had just set into motion was wise. "This is parenting now," I said, glancing at Lyra, "isn't it?" "Probably," she replied, "also possibly a crime. I don't know what the rules are for catching rats in this city. If there are rules against catching a rat, I will eat my shoes on the main square. Turns out it wasn't against the rules and nobody cared about orphans hunting for dinner. And that there are way too many rats in the city, as they were back in under 2 hours. Mira walked in first, her face glowing with pride, holding a rat in each hand by the scruff of the neck like it was the winning prize. Puck wasn't far behind with a third, being her partner. And the one he was bringing along was the size of a small dog. What the hell do these things eat? In the end, after everyone returned, we had 8 rats, which we put into cages in the basement. They were lively, squirming, hissing little demons after not getting much food, and I had the sudden realization that I had no idea how to handle rats properly. "Well," I muttered as I looked at Lyra, while the kids were just as curious as anybody could be in this situation. "We'll test them in here." "They're gonna get potion powers?" Mira asked. "I hope they won't turn into super rats, or into Splinter." "Who?" they all asked, looking at me. "Nothing." I waved a hand, and although they were still curious, Puck managed to interrupt their silence. "Can we keep one?" Puck asked. "Call it Ratiel?" "Absolutely not," Lyra and I said in unison. "Oh," he said, suddenly no longer that happy, making Mira rub his head. "They are not pets," she whispered. "They are vermin." "Anyway, go," I pushed the kids out. "This is dangerous, so go up, take a bath, and sleep early." But, nope, no excuses. I cut Puck's complaining short as I shooed them out. We only needed 2 for this, so 2 of the rats, codenamed Ratiel and Ratiella, were moved to a spare cage for observation. When all was set up and the cage was secured, I prepared the dropper while Lyra held the vial with utmost care, as if handling an explosive. What if it was actually like nitroglycerin? Hope not. Anyway, her hands were steady, but I could see the tension in her face and eyes. "Do it gently," she whispered. "You think I'm going to squirt it in their eyes?" "Don't tempt fate," she warned me, making me shrug. I crouched down beside the cage and used the dropper to dab a single drop onto each rat's nose. They squirmed when it hit them and licked instinctively, removing it. And then, nothing. We waited. 1 minute, 2. The rats groomed themselves, sniffed the corners of the cage, and occasionally squeaked at each other. I looked up at Lyra, seeing the same confusion. "They're fine," I stated the obvious. "No seizures, no spasms, nothing." "I don't think that was ever the concern," she replied, arms crossed, her brows becoming more and more drawn together. "Let's give it a little more time. Maybe it's just—" Then it happened, the moment I began speaking. One of the rats suddenly sprang up as if jolted by lightning, followed by watching it turn into a ball as its fur puffed out, its tail stiffened like a twig. But instead of falling over, it started running in circles around the cage, surprisingly fast, really fast. "Okay, that's not normal," I perked up, watching. "Look at the other one," Puck shouted. "What are you still doing here?" I yelled at the door, seeing the eyes of the kids looking in, watching what was happening. But sure enough, the second rat was twitching, then sprinting from corner to corner like it had too much caffeine and far too much confidence in catching whatever it was chasing. Then it tried to scale the side of the cage. It even succeeded, but as it hung from the top, it fell back down, and then tried again. "They're energized," Lyra said, awe in her voice. "They're possessed," I muttered. "By the way," I leaned over so only she could hear me, "those are both boy rats, see?" Of course, she blushed, nodding her head, and answered in a way that made me almost laugh out loud. "It seems a potion puts them into a drive to mate, but focuses it on the other sex. Maybe." "I don't know," I answered, giggling to myself. One thing was sure, these boys weren't interested in each other, but they wanted out. Very much so. We watched for another minute as the rats continued their rampage in their desperation to hump a female rat. Then it turns out the potion simply had a plateau where it decided to take over as they finally did jump on each other. The problem was that it was violent. The dominant rat not only overpowered the other, but it also killed it. Damn, and when it was done, it just slumped in the corner like someone who'd just run 3 laps around the city walls. How long did that last? I asked. About a minute, Lyra said, checking her notes. Maybe a little more. So, it works. It works, she echoed, whispering like she didn't quite believe it. A single drop, with a delayed onset, brief effect window, but real, and dangerous. It is, I said, watching the rat lie on its side, gasping for air and still in a delirious state. And that was a rat. A human-sized dose might make someone tear off their shirt and leap over a table. It could be refined, Lyra added, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her mind racing, making her bite her lower lip. More stable duration. Maybe there's another way to avoid making it so violent. Maybe bind it to a food-based medium or powdered capsules. Whoa, wait. I blinked my eyes. Binding it? To food? You think potions could be made into food? I'm thinking of an application, she answered, looking innocent. There were some mentions of binding methods in the book. Lyra. I gave her a look. You're thinking of selling sex potions. I'm thinking of selling safe ones. Imagine the market. She pouted, blushed until her ears began steaming, but it just made me grin. You really are a businesswoman under that shy surface, eh? Your fault, she pouted, turning away. Really? I taught you to monetize libido. When? Not that long ago, she muttered while I stepped behind her, holding her close and playing with her tummy through her clothes. You know, I said thoughtfully, one thing is true. Sex sells. Anway, let's refine this thing first. Then we can consider a market to break into. As for the application of it, combining them with food, sure, why not? Maybe we can create something that will bring in money. A lot of money. Chapter 63, Danger 1. The midday heat was cooking Velgrada's streets, especially in the lower city, coating the alleys in a thick layer of stench of tar, piss, and overripe market fruits. The crowds in the lower borough moved through it without thinking about it, already used to the smell and to the buzz of flies along with the squeaking rats scurrying in and out of the sewers. Cedric walked lost in thought through it all, searching in the filth, retracing the supposed steps of his last victim. He was still searching for the girl's body, despite the impossibility of it. It was nowhere to be found on the outside, so she had no way to be still in the city. No matter what everyone was saying, rumors are rumors. Shaking his head, he refused to acknowledge that he felt tired. More tired than he had ever been. He hadn't truly slept in 3 nights, if not more. He was losing count. Not to mention, whenever he tried, he was having weird dreams, nightmares even, causing him to wake with a headache. But worse than the pain was the stillness, not the cities but his missions. There was nothing to do, and he was forbidden from doing his usual routine. There was nobody to tail, nobody to abduct or kill. His hands were itching. Curse it all, he groaned. The main reason for it was that the Crimson Ledger had retreated underground and halted all movements for now, until they had a better overview of their situation. Garrick ensured he wasn't going to back down. He would become the new city lord. They are so close to it. But he won't rush into a trap, not until they figure out who had bled the 2 bodies and carved an S into the corpses. Not until they knew if Silverhaven had genuinely warned them or if it was just a ruse. But being unable to do anything was not his way of working. He needed to feel something, to keep his senses sharp and deadly. Just from the past days of inactivity, he was already feeling them getting rusty, which further increased his mind, slowly becoming unstable and irrational. Sitting still wasn't easy for Cedric, not ever. He was a creature of action, even when he was an official adventurer. He made a name for himself, rising through the ranks, coming back from missions with a new trophy every time. Then, as his notoriety spread, he became the one to stand behind chairs during negotiations, cracking his knuckles and others' skulls until someone agreed with what he wanted. It became so bad, as some said, that he was thrown out of the guild for constantly breaking the rules and taking jobs through unofficial channels, using guild resources for his own benefit. Yet the true joy came to him after leaving the Adventurers Guild and joining the Crimson Ledger. The world opened up for him, with always something to do and someone to play with. until he broke them and moved on to a new toy. He had to return to normalcy. So almost like he was cursed, he crept through the streets without actual aim, his armor left behind, dressed as a beggar with only a dagger hidden in his cloak. The girl was an urchin, so he would sniff the rest out, and if he must, he would kill them, one by one, cleaning up the streets in the process. A win-win in his books. By this day, he had stalked his way through the East Wall market, pretending to beg, pretending to exist while listening to other beggars, grabbing some of them, dragging them into the sewers before finishing them off. Most of them had nothing to give, so his anger only rose, not even placated, when he slit their throats and cut off their heads to make sure these ones were not coming back, even if Silverhaven wanted to be the patron of the dregs of society. Yet, nothing. No matter how closely he was watching, looking for signs. Was it really Silverhaven? Because they didn't leave signs. Everyone should do it, but if they were the ones, it was making more sense, which besides angering him was finally scaring him too. That was trouble. Over here, I saw one. There was a blur of motion in the alley nearby to him and the voice of children. It immediately brought his mind to the present as he looked, seeing two children scurrying after something. A rat? He moved closer, adjusting the hood draped over his head, pretending to examine the trash between houses, looking for something to eat or just collect. But then his breath got stuck in his throat. The girl. For one horrifying, impossible moment, he couldn't move any of his muscles. He couldn't even breathe. His mouth opened, trying to help draw in air, but then closed, seeing how futile it was, while his throat worked around a soundless curse. She was supposed to be dead, not running around, healthy again. Even if she survived, she wouldn't be able to walk, ever again. He had made sure of that. Garrick told him to get answers, and he had, and then he just played around with his prize. Yes, the girl was strong and refused to break easily, but by the end she had screamed and sobbed and whimpered, until she had gone still. He remembered the moment even now, how her eyes rolled back, how her breath failed to come, and how he'd left her for the river. It wasn't just a dream, was it? She was supposed to be dead, yet there she was. Worse of all, she was laughing. How is that possible? It wasn't. Cedric felt his stomach twist, and his hands shook. He dropped the trash he'd been holding and forgot about even Silverhaven. There was nothing else in his mind. Just that kid. Her face wasn't even scarred. From where he stood, maybe. Maybe there was a faint line on her jaw, perhaps. But no more than a scratch. She moved like she wasn't broken in every bone in her body. She talked like she hadn't been forcefully kept alive to provide more fun, and worse of it all, she was happy. Smiling? How? And why is she surrounded by other children? He stepped back, his body half in shadow now, his eyes burning in a maddened fire. This was impossible. Was it a trick, a double, a lure, a legendary homunculus? Or did one of the fabled elven necromancers come to town? Or worse, had someone saved her? He knew what Garrick would say if he learned the girl was alive. Not just alive, but returned and embedded with a group of street children, giggling and running around. This was an open threat. In that moment, Cedric finally knew something new. Something he only put others through. Now he knew panic. He recognized it by now. But this had to go. His jaw clenched so hard that one of his teeth actually cracked. But the pain helped him focus. Action. He needed to move and do something, so he tailed them. Slowly, carefully, noting everything and using his gold-ranked adventurer experience to its fullest. Whatever was happening, he no longer cared. The girl had to die, and every other kid too. Everyone she was meeting today. They would all die. Watching, he noted that the children moved with a clear purpose. They weren't scrounging because they were hunting. Cedric saw it clearly now. Yes, they were instructed. They worked in pairs, coordinated, like street scouts trained to trap. But what? Or who? Was it him? No. They were going after something else. When the girl caught a rat by the scruff and raised it overhead, cheering, Cedric nearly retched. Are they hunting for food? Can't be. And it couldn't be, because his mind registered a new fact. They were dressed much better than actual urchins. Those clothes on them, the clean skin. Someone was taking care of them. So he held back and didn't jump on them. Instead, he followed them from a distance, his feet moving with perfect precision, always keeping silent against the stone roads. Of course, the kids were amateurs and they didn't look back. Not once. Not even the girl. Prey. No, not even that, as most prey animals had the instinct to keep a watch. These little stains on the city did not. After tailing them, he watched as they returned to a building that looked to be a bakery. Plain door, clean windows, and a carved wooden sign, with an S-shaped baguette on it. An S. Wait, Cedric stopped at the corner and watched, his eyes unblinking. The children vanished inside. He stood there, unmoving, until his legs began to ache, finally bringing him out of his weird stupor, finding the dagger in his hand appear and grip it so hard that not even a crowbar could pry it from him. "I am going to kill all of you," he cursed as he took his first step towards the building. He didn't care that it was daylight, and for sure he didn't care who was inside. Silverhaven or not, they will all die because his urge said so. In that moment, seeing Mira walking had cracked something loose in his skull, probably a jagged piece of his brain. Or whatever it was burning his clarity away, turning it into bloodlust that overrode everything else. Surprisingly, though, it also brought serenity to him. His pulse no longer pounded in his ears, and his thoughts no longer spun around in fruitless circles. Instead, everything became clear and focused, causing his movements to be smooth and deliberate, reflecting his skill set. This was what he knew best. The hunt, and then the sweet, pleasuring kill. There would be no more waiting and no more wondering, just blood flowing. He circled back behind the bakery, slipping into the alley until he spotted the old gutter pipe running up the wall beside the back windows. It was half rusted, but strong enough for him. His fingers gripped the edges of the brick as he climbed, making sure he was slow and controlled, no wasted movement and no loud noises. He didn't want to alert his prey. The second-story shutter was cracked open, a breeze pushing lace curtains aside. Always a good entry point. People didn't think twice about closing these, as they couldn't imagine others getting this high. Always, always a big mistake and a perfect opening for an assassin. Without a second thought, he slipped through and landed silently on the floorboards, crouching, eyes sweeping the room. A bedroom. It was neatly kept. There was a threadbare quilt on the bed and children's shoes by the door. So this is where the urchins were living. Weird. Who would take them in and spend money on them? No matter. Banishing his thoughts, he moved toward the door, peeking out into the narrow hallway, noticing the stairway leading downstairs. Listening, he could hear the mix of voices rising from below. There was a muffled conversation, then laughter. The girl's voice was amongst them. He could recognize it from memory, even if she wasn't screaming. Just by her voice touching his ears, Cedric's lips pulled back into something between a sneer and a snarl. He felt happy, almost even erect. They're laughing. All of them. Good. He will carve a permanent smile onto each of their faces. Step by step, he crept downward like a cat, making no noise at all. The old wood almost betrayed him twice, but his skills allowed him to shift his weight just enough, and just in time to keep silent. And to make a mental note to burn the building down too, when he is done. He will turn the bakery into an oven and eliminate all evidence. By then, the hallway came into his view as he finally saw them. Down on the first floor, a young but certainly adult woman was the first to appear from the cellar, ascending the stairs, brushing her sleeves, her head turned back toward the others, talking about something potion-related, but Cedric didn't care. People like these would think that a cough medicine is equivalent to an actual potion. Behind her came a man, somewhat tall, calm, still wet behind the ears, saying something funny that made one of the kids giggle. By then, Cedric didn't think, or more like he couldn't think. He just lunged from the shadow at the top of the stairs, his teeth clenched while sneering like a madman with his dagger raised as he went straight for the woman in front, here to stab it through her eye, incapacitate, and leave her for the crescendo of this coming massacre. Chapter 64, Danger 2. The moment my foot touched the last step, just as we were coming up from the basement, something shifted around and in me. It was my instincts taking over my body, reacting to a sense of danger ingrained into my body, probably through years of training as a child. For a moment, the ambush, where this world's Auriel perished and I came over, flashed before me, telling me I had the same feeling back then. Was I going to die again? I didn't hear anything, nor could I think of dying anymore. I was moving. There was no creak of floorboards under my foot, no yell came from me, and I didn't even inhale sharply. I was already acting as I reached out to shove Lyra away from the perceived danger, whatever it may be. That was when the body emerged from the shadows, and I finally realized what I was feeling and why everything had slowed down to a snail's crawl all of a sudden. An assassin. I didn't perceive the man visually until he was already in mid-lunge, a dagger-shaped thing stabbing out, held between gloved fingers, aimed straight at Lyra's face. It seemed so slow, including my movement, my finger holding onto her arm, pulling, not even thinking about potentially throwing her down the stairs. I was doing everything to get her out of the path of that weapon. In the meantime, I watched the crazed man. His eyes were wild, his mouth open in a sneer that was unlike anything I had seen yet. Not even the beast folk were like this. While I was still shoving Lyra away, I stepped in front of her, and with a snap, everything returned to normal speed as pain coursed through my body. The dagger he held plunged directly into the meat of my shoulder, slipping between my collarbone and chest, burning cold and hot at the same time as it got lodged in me. Grimacing, I pushed the feeling down and initiated a counterattack. The first thing that came to mind. I seized his wrist before he could yank the blade free, which may cause even more damage to me than when it entered my body. At least, that was what my brain was telling me. With that, I twisted on his wrist, or tried, using the momentum of his lunge against him, and I realized that he was strong. Far stronger than me. My knees almost buckled just from the resistance in his arm. But it worked in stopping him for a second. Just enough, probably thanks to all the adrenaline I was feeling. I could hear how Lyra and the kids screamed. Some of the children froze at the bottom of the stairs when hearing it. Just as a glimpse, I caught how Mira's eyes went wide while Puck reached for something. A pan? A ladle? There's no use. If they get involved in this fight, they'll die. If I can't stop this bastard, they also die. Then, as his hood fell back, and I watched the features of his face, a sudden realization hit me. The face was eerily what Mira had described to me. I think it clicked then that this bastard was her torturer, and he probably saw her and followed her back home. Good, because if I can kill him now, we will have one less issue to contend with. And for once again, I really wanted to kill him. Maybe he sensed my intent as he grinned at me, his lips peeling back into his teeth, becoming a snarl. He knew all right. And he also knew he was stronger than me. "Nice killing intent there, kid," he hissed, contesting my waning strength that was losing its adrenaline boost. "Too bad you are still in your diapers, pulling on your foreskin, wondering what it's for. Let me cut it off, along with your dick, and choke you to death with your balls." With that, he tore the dagger from my shoulder with a twist, spraying blood across the wall, and slammed his knee into my gut. The air left my lungs in a rush, and probably that was why I couldn't scream out with pain. But I wasn't going to fall down, forcing my legs to prop me up while I staggered back. Ignoring the pain, I still stood before him. He advanced by the time I planted one leg. Fuck. Too quick. He is too fast for me. He wasn't even trying to hide it. His steps were clean, out in the open but efficient. I could tell that he had done this 100 million times before, and it showed. By the time he was on me, the dagger spun once in his hand as he was reversing his grip on it, flicking the blood in the opposite direction from the blade, straight onto the walls, not letting it stain the handle and making it slippery. Then, before I could try to adapt, his stance dropped, only leaving my instincts to scream at me that this was not good. This was a killing blow. So, allowing my muscles to dictate what to do, I leaned backward like I was in a yoga instruction video, letting the strike hiss past my neck, still slicing it, but only barely, letting a thin layer of blood flow out. But I wasn't dead yet. Seeing it, With a bit of surprise, he followed up with a backhand across my jaw. My vision tilted at once, and I tasted more blood in my throat and mouth. Without looking, I lashed out with my elbow and caught his ribs somehow, but it was like hitting iron. "What an interesting little fucker," he laughed. "You're better than you look. Say, kill the girl and the kids, and I'll take you in as my apprentice." "Go to hell," I spat, finally realizing what was in my hand still, staggering, opening my tensed fingers around the vial, the aphrodisiac. Useless in combat. Or, fuck it. It is time to go all in, especially because Cedric lunged again, dagger raised at me. Just as before, he was fast and I was slower. But he was also loud, mad, and overconfident. So I had a chance. His mouth was open with bloodlust, grinning and sticking his tongue out, wanting to taste my blood, or he was just a rabid dog. Well then, take your fucking medicine. And with that thought, I threw it at him. It was a bullseye. Dead center. I should introduce darts to this world. The glass shattered in his mouth as he instinctively bit down, and he immediately gagged. Abandoning his attack, he backed off, trying to make himself vomit, thinking it was poison, realizing he was careless. "Serves you right, you motherfucker." For a split second, his body jerked in confusion, glancing at me. He spat over and over, some shards spraying out, but most of the viscous, grey-coloured liquid had already hit his tongue, his throat, and found its way into his bloodstream. He staggered at once. It seems the more we administer, the quicker the results are. I just didn't know what the effects would be on humans, especially at this dosage. "What the hell?" Cedric growled, wiping his mouth, breathing, and then something flickered in his eyes. Realization? Maybe. Horror? A bit. Rage? Absolutely. "You! What did you... Then it hit him again, and his knees buckled. His whole body trembled by then, and next his hand opened, dropping the dagger. He gasped, clutching at his chest like his skin was on fire, trying to tear off his clothes, along with his own skin beneath it. I saw how veins along his neck pulsed violently, and more were popping around his head. I even saw that some actually burst, turning his skin red as the blood was trying desperately to find a way to ooze out. In the end, it was coming out through his pores, nose, eyes, ears. I could have just waited and let it play out, but I was not trusting the potion in itself, or the man's body to succumb to it. What if he endures the initial burst? So I lunged at him, and I tackled him, slamming us both into the wall and down to the ground. I went for the dagger on the floor, but he was lucid enough and kicked it away. So then I drove my fist into his face, over and over again, even with a punctured shoulder. I couldn't even feel that injury. I was just going at him like an ape. He barely reacted, not because he was durable, but because his body was caught between spasms, his breath coming out in moans now. Involuntarily, of course, because for sure he wasn't enjoying being pummeled like this. Between twitches, he was trying to fight it, but his mind was no longer in control, and he wasn't in a sane state either from the get-go. Then, as I broke his nose, fractured his face, and I heard his jaw crack. Finally, he suddenly screamed. It wasn't a battle cry, it was something more raw, primal even, with a tinge of the loss of agency over his faculties. "Just shut the fuck up, forever," I grunted as I finally lowered my fists. Why was I going for his face? There was something better, a more open and softer target. So I began hammering his neck, breaking his windpipes, and punching his Adam's apple back into his throat. "Fuck. You. Just die." Sitting on his chest, I watched as he was now choking, trying to breathe, but he couldn't, and he realized it. Huh. There was fear in those eyes, replacing the madness, looking at me. And I never broke eye contact. I kept watching as life finally slipped from him, spasming, twitching, and then finally going still. I wasn't blinking, making sure he indeed died. Slowly, with as much fear as Mira felt when he was toying with her. Good riddance. Then finally I stood up from him, noticing that he was stiff as a mountain still, even with a gross patch on his trousers. You. Fucking weirdo. With a bloody spat that landed on his still open eyes, I knew he was indeed dead because there was no flinching at all. Good. Good. Turning around, I barely felt any energy in my body and noticed that the children were silent, looking. Mira stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, hands trembling. Puck held a rolling pin like a sword, but his legs were shaking, unable to make a move, yet he still stood before the others. "Is he dead?" Lyra asked, coming out of her stupor. "Yeah," I breathed, my vision swimming, "but just in case." I wobbled, picking up the dagger and plunged it into his heart, twisting it 3 times, like uncorking a wine bottle. "There. Must be dead. But maybe we should cut his head off, for good measure." "What?" She stared at me, gawking. "Did you throw the potion at him?" "Yeah." I smiled, suddenly throwing up blood. He was the perfect guinea pig for human testing. Make note, don't consume it all, it's deadly. But with that, I failed to stay up anymore as everything had gone dark. Chapter 65, Dreams. I blinked myself awake, and I was, well, not in a daze, not precisely, certainly not from blood loss or panic. I was just feeling lost. It was like a moment of mental fog was lifting from my mind as I raised my head, and when my eyes opened again, everything was wrong. First, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me, making me squint when I looked directly into its source. The movement made me realize that my elbows rested on a laminated desk cluttered with paperwork, pens, and an already cold coffee in a chipped mug at the right edge. Exactly where I managed to bang it against the coffee machine's metal edge a day ago. Rubbing my eyes, I noticed the monitor before me, flickering slightly. I could also make out the text across the top of the screen, Q4 spreadsheet revision, final V, 3.4.1 XLXX. I was in the office, my cubicle. Leaning out, looking, the carpet was still stained near the water cooler from Jenkins's celebratory champagne spill from last year, the bastard who got the promotion on the back of my report. The calendar on the wall was what caught my attention next. It was still the same one with puppies for each month. Your pawsome. Fuck you too, I thought as I stared at it, unblinking, leaning back to my chair. I knew this place, every inch of it. Every bit of it reeked of the stench I hated the most. Then, a shadow passed in front of my cubicle, stopping and coming in, uninvited. "Sleeping on the job now?" Osborne, my direct manager's voice. He stood at the entrance of my booth, the fluorescent light above him giving him a faint halo. Oh, fuck you and your ironic posture, considering he was the devil in every textbook as far as I cared. He wore the same too-tight button-up shirt and forced that same fake grin, looking at me, here to dump another batch of I need this for yesterday kind of work. Trying to buddy me up. Yet you are younger than me, getting the position because of daddy. Eat a bag of dicks. I started, half standing, but I didn't get far. Don't lie, he cut me off, waving a hand. You've been slacking off all week. Late on revisions, slow on data merges, and missing headers in every report. Do you think this is a daycare? You're not here to nap your life away, Auriel. I swallowed hard, holding back my thoughts. Maybe I should grab the box cutter and slice his throat open. Perhaps I should, because some part of me knew this wasn't real, that it couldn't be real. But then the feeling of shame flooded me all of a sudden. What was I thinking of? "I'll fix it," I murmured. "You'll damn well do more than that," he snapped at my answer. "You think this company owes you anything?" It owed me a lot, especially because it caused my hair to start thinning. Be grateful we keep people like you around. You're lucky I don't call HR and start the termination papers right now. Yes. I bowed my head like I always did. It was easier to submit and then to apologize. I was simply here to get through the day and avoid making waves. Otherwise, my life would be practically over. No money, no rent, no home. I watched as Osborne scoffed with a grin and walked away, while I sat there staring at the screen. The numbers blurred before my eyes and my chest tightened again, prompting me to massage it before I reached for the coffee cup. However, the black liquid tasted like ash when I took a sip. Fuck this shit. Then my phone buzzed on the desk, and a quick glance at the screen told me everything I needed to know. "Becky, where the hell is the proper cream? I told you not to buy the SPF one. You never listen. Now my whole routine's ruined." I stared at the message, wanting to wake up from this nightmare. But another buzz. Becky, do you even care how this affects me? I swear, Auriel, it's like I'm dating a child. Another buzz. She wasn't stopping. Becky. Ugh, you're not even going to answer now. Figures, you're so selfish. The irony nearly made me laugh. So I picked up the phone and wrote one simple message back. I don't care because nothing would help that face of yours anyway. I ignored the rest, turning the phone off. Fuck it. Fuck everything. Then, I sank deeper into my seat, the office lights growing harsher, the walls closing in, the weight of it all pressing against my lungs, making me feel like I was having another heart attack. Wait, I already had one. What was I doing here? Yes, I wasn't this Auriel anymore. I had already finished this life and started a new one. I was Auriel, but not here. The moment I embraced the idea, everything around me cracked and the lights flickered. My desk vanished and the floor tilted, throwing me off, falling into darkness. And suddenly I was outside. The air smelled of fresh hay and dirt, while I heard children's laughter echo nearby. When I looked down, I realized my legs were shorter than I remembered. My arms are thinner too. And my clothes. These were, a child's tunic, patched at the elbows. Moving my limbs, I could tell that it was a little too oversized for me. I was a kid, for sure, but this was not a childhood I recognized. I didn't need to wait long to remember that this was the other Auriel's memories. Yes, this was the orphanage where he grew up, and I currently stood in a yard that was expansive and uneven, surrounded by wooden fencing and crude rope courses, planks balanced on barrels, and nets tied between trees. Just like a boot camp. It was an obstacle course that had seen better days, but despite that, it was alive, energetic. And I was in the middle of it. Come on, Auriel, a girl shouted at me with freckles, a wild red hair on the top of her head, while her grin was missing a tooth. She scampered ahead of me, darting up a slanted wooden wall like a monkey, waiting for me to follow her. Last one to the bell scrubs dishes tonight, another voice yelled. I didn't hesitate anymore, letting my body move on its own. I ran, my bare feet pounding on dirt, before jumping straight onto the rope ladder swaying as I climbed after her. Soon I was not only catching up, but leaving her behind as I vaulted over a log, tumbled into a roll like I'd done it 1,000 times. It just felt right. Every movement, every sharp turn, dodging a swinging rod. My body remembered it well, and my muscles knew this course so well that I could do it with my eyes closed. By the end, after I rang the bell and climbed down, my lungs ached, but in a good way. Best of it all, that dull, soul-crushing pressure I'd felt in the office was completely gone. There was nothing here but childlike joy. Unfair, 2 for 1, the same girl said, arriving at the finish line, making me smugly grin and nod, taking up her challenge. So we climbed, crawled, balanced, and leaped across the crude training course once again. At one point, I looked to the side and saw a group of adventurers sitting on benches, leaning against trees, or sharpening their weapons, watching us with amusement. Somehow I knew that they were the ones running this place, not nuns or something similar. This was an orphanage run by retired adventurers. They're getting faster, one woman said, her arms crossed, a longsword at her back. I'm not sure if I heard them or caught them reading their lips, but it felt like they were speaking while I was there. Bet Auriel beats the record again, another chuckled, nudging her shoulder. Yes, I did beat the record. I scaled the last platform and rang the rusted bell tied to a tree branch at the end, breathless but grinning from ear to ear while I looked down and saw the other kids. Best of it all, I wasn't tired. Hell, I felt invincible. I sat at the top for a moment, catching my breath, the wind ruffling my hair, going past my face. It was so freeing. I could also see the orphanage beyond the training yard. It was an old but sturdy building, with a garden in the back and patched-up walls surrounding it. Smoke rose from the chimney at the back, meaning that someone was cooking us dinner. This wasn't paradise, because I knew that it was rough. Makeshift even, crude by normal standards, but it was so good. No one was yelling about reports or creams or sudden overtime and getting home late. Then, while I was basking in the feeling, someone climbed up next to me. The same girl as before, covered in mud, panting but happy, sat down next to me. "Bet you can't do it blindfolded next time," she grinned. "Bet I can," I smirked back. We just laughed, and for that brief moment I forgot entirely who I had been. I was just Auriel. Nothing but a kid, learning to be an adventurer. Someone who could become something more when I grew up. Someone famous. But like all dreams, even the good ones fade away. As I sat there, the sunlight dimmed, and the trees twisted as darkness enveloped them. The laughter I heard just a moment ago echoed strangely now. And when I looked down, I saw the mud on the ground turning into blood. The bell I'd rung was now tarnished, dripping red instead of rust, and I was alone again. The forest was no longer the same, and I stood in the middle of a midnight ambush. The caravan was on fire, people were screaming. I died here. I recall thinking this was an incredible adventure. Finally, on my first mission to prove myself, it should have been a simple job. I was good too. I was trained by someone famous. I was recommended to the guild, and I was supposed to be a rising star. Was I too proud? Confident? Am I not someone special? No. I wasn't, even if I believed I was, because I still died here, like a nobody. Number. I did not die. I did not die from a heart attack, nor did I die from a beast folk cutting me down. And especially, I am not dying from trivial injuries caused by exhaustion and a mad assassin. I lived then, and I live now too. So stop thinking about dying, Auriel. Time to wake the fuck up. Ugh. Slowly. Slowly. That's a familiar voice. I moaned, trying to open my eyes, but a towel was pressing down on my forehead, slipping, and I had no energy to reach up to fix it. "Thank the gods," Lyra sobbed, fixing it for me before kissing my lips and hugging me. "Finally, you are back. I thought I lost you." "Not that easily," I grunted, my throat feeling like there was a ball stuck in it. "How long was I out?" "A day," she mumbled. "Damn. What about—" "We have taken care of it. The body is wrapped up closely in the basement. We cleaned the house and, well, nothing happened since." "Call Marcus." "Auriel?" she asked, seeing that I was already trying to move, so she began helping me sit up in bed. It was night, but even the flame atop the candle on the bedside table hurt my eyes. "Just call Marcus Veron over," I moaned, forcing myself to start, well, functioning again. I was not in the mood to go to sleep. This fucker was of the Crimson Ledger, and I bet he is a high-level bastard. We need to strike before they recognize he is gone. Marcus will bring the body away and offer it to the city lord. I knew she was about to say she didn't understand, and neither did I. I just knew that this is something that needs to be used, one way or another, probably from the training in my childhood. Chapter 66, Delivery. The knock came just after the second bell of the city's clock tower, just past midnight. Hearing it, Marcus Veron jolted upright, his hand going to the short sword tucked under his pillow out of sheer instinct and of what had been happening in the past weeks. He had been asleep for barely an hour, if even that, but that short rest had been nothing but a shallow tussle. He was unable to actually fall asleep. The whole thing with the Crimson Ledger was gnawing on his mind, even if things were fine. He expected trouble to come knocking any time, and maybe that time was now, just as the bells began tolling. Another knock, 3 precise taps against his door, signaling it was one of the guards from outside. Of course it was. The realization clearing the fog from his mind also made him relax a little. An assassin wouldn't knock in the first place. Realizing that part, Marcus exhaled sharply, shaking his head before rising from his bed in the corner of the room. 10 minutes later, he was walking, dressed up, heading to the entry of their compound, where supposedly a boy was anxiously waiting for him. After the guard's description, it was someone who was forking for shade. Marcus had an idea who that boy was, and sure enough, there he was. And finally, after the introduction, he learned the boy's name. Puck. Small frame, thin limbs, a dripping nose. Yeah, This was the same kid who delivered the first letter to him, leading up to their meeting with Shade. Finally, the boy said, holding up a hand, wanting to grab him, something that the guards, earning their pay, stopped him from doing, holding on to his wrist. "Let me go," he said, wiggling his hand free. "We need you to come to us. Now, hurry." "What happened?" Marcus asked, stifling a yawn, but getting alert one more time, seeing the boy's eyes and that he wasn't joking around. "Can't say," Puck replied, looking at the guards, "but you would want to know." Marcus stared at the boy for a long beat, trying to see what this was about. "And what exactly am I supposed to do?" "Just come already," Puck moaned. "Please?" In the end, believing him, he threw on his coat and belt without a word, tucked 2 throwing knives into the lining, and attached his sword to his left before he followed Puck into the night. He couldn't tell if he would curse himself because of it or not. But there was no turning back now. Walking the streets of Velgrada at this hour, he had to realize how dark and quiet it was. While thinking about it, Marcus imagined people jumping on them from one street or the other. But that never happened. Or just not yet. He couldn't tell while keeping pace with Puck as they cut through the side streets, ducking under washing lines and between narrow alley gaps. He was trying to see if they were doing this to remain unnoticed. Or the boy was unafraid of thugs inhabiting these back alley roads. Or was this part of the trap? Marcus's mind worked overtime the entire way, gnawing on possibilities, chewing through worry and panic, one after another, until they were finally at the bakery. It surprised him that nothing had happened, and looking at the shop, there was no light in the windows, being just as dormant as most of the buildings they had passed by. Entering it, the smell hit him first. Even if they cleaned up, the metallic and sharp kick of blood was still in the air, causing him to grab onto the hilt of his sword. The fact that he could smell it meant that someone died in here. Looking around, the front of the bakery had been hastily cleaned, but not enough to hide the scuffed floorboards or the faint streaks visible at the back, where the stairways led either down to the basement or up to the second level. "Come," Puck whispered, and then he was gone again, going upstairs. Following, Marcus found Auriel sitting in a chair, currently shirtless and wrapped in bandages. His chest was a mess of bruises, and going by the big lump pressed against one of his shoulders, there had to be a bigger injury hiding under that bundle of gauze. He looked like shit. But his eyes were clear. Walking in, Lyra was sitting beside him, holding a damp cloth, probably finishing changing the bandages not that long ago, in the middle of checking the scar going around Auriel's throat. Something big had happened. "Does it look that bad?" I asked because I was feeling like shit. But the way Marcus looked at me confirmed that I probably also looked like a buffalo dump. Looking over me, Marcus didn't respond right away. But after confirming I was indeed alive, he just nodded. "What happened?" "An assassin. From the ledger." I groaned, standing up, allowing Vila to hold my hand. "Let's get down. I'll show you," I murmured, not wanting to stay still and succumb to my tiredness. So instead of letting myself sleep, I was leading our guest down to the basement. The body was laid down in a corner, covered up to its neck in a bundle of cloth and anything they found to tie him up. But the face was visible. He was already pale, bloodless, his mouth half open, slumped there like a sack of meat. "Haw!" Marcus inhaled sharply, seeing him and also recognizing the face. "Is that—" "Yes," I chuckled, making me cough a little. "That's him. The ledger's own little butcher. Butchered. Fitting if you ask me." When I confirmed it, he looked at me. Then at the corpse. Then back at me. Then, "You killed a gold-ranked adventurer," he whispered, and I saw his face turn a bit whiter than the corpse was. "Was he that?" I asked, tilting my head. "As far as I know, he was ousted from the guild." "You—" Marcus took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "That doesn't matter. Do you have any idea what that means? He wasn't just some thug. He was one of the Ledger's top enforcers, part of their leadership. Gods, do you know how many times people tried to get him killed? They couldn't even bribe someone to try after the first 10 failed attempts. Everyone knows in the business knows that fact." "Hire the proper hitmen then," I joked, making me shrug. "Look, I didn't plan for it," I muttered, "but he came here and tried to kill us." "That's it?" "Enough for me," I raised an eyebrow. "I won't stop and ask questions of whys and hows, not that I could either. Or should I start negotiating? I snorted, shaking my head. Pull out a weapon on me and I will end you. Does the ledger know? He gulped. Who knows? I shrugged again, which made me smile, seeing how frustrated he became from my apparent nonchalant approach to this. I don't think so, though. Marcus opened his mouth, and half of the first syllable came out before he gulped it back down and closed his mouth again. What do you want me to do? He asked, exasperated, pinching the ridge of his nose. Because if you think I'm hiding the body of one of the most infamous killers in the city, one that wasn't touched by the guards either. Who work for the city lord, mind you, then? Exactly my point. I looked at Marcus, making him fall silent. I don't want you to hide it, I continued slowly. I want you to deliver it. Huh? Marcus blinked his eyes in confusion. To whom? To the city lord. Who else? There was a long pause at that, and then he chuckled. But seeing that I was still looking at him, he realized I wasn't joking. You're serious. I am. And you think that's going to go well? Of course, I smiled, my eyes never leaving his face, as I had already thought this through. Was it foolproof? Of course not. But it was the best I could do at the time. If Valcroft is as smart as we both believe he is, then he'll know how to use this. The reason he probably didn't touch any of the Ledger's people was that he wasn't keen on initiating the struggle for his throne. Starting a war is never a good thing. Well, not when the other party expects it to happen. That's why surprise attacks are what most people prefer. The status quo is something easy to slip into and enjoy maintaining. However, the current situation is perfect for something like this. The Crimson Ledger still thinks Silverhaven is angry with them. Oh. The S markings, Marcus muttered, and finally things began to fall into place for him. I didn't mean for them to draw the wrong conclusions. I just wanted my name to be put out there. I just overestimated my reach. But the rumors had been what they are now. Oh well, it does work out because they think someone powerful is watching them, which we can exploit even further. They're paranoid, shaken, and we can give them a real reason to be scared. Well, the city lord can if he plays things the right way. It is in his best interest anyway. Listening to me, Marcus crossed his arms, mulling over my words. Maybe just show up, drop him off, and let the city lord know that someone has the same enemy as him. Someone who you are friendly with and can handle himself, I added. Although I did hope the city lord won't come to me to start killing any and all gold-rank opponents he has, because I will refuse. I don't think I can handle a silver one either. Not without Lady Luck standing with me one more time, but they didn't need to know that part. And what if the city lord draws the wrong conclusions? Wheel. I coughed and winced, holding my side, making Lear a step closer to support my body's weight. Let's hope not. You are mad, he grunted, looking at the corpse. You want me to carry a dead man to the city lord's estate? Yeah, I do. I nodded with a half-smile. That's why I told you to come right now. It would draw too much attention in the daylight. The weight in the cart was heavier than Marcus would have liked, even if it wasn't him who killed his passenger. He was still transporting the wrapped-up corpse, and it was still one of the carriages from his enterprise. He sat hunched forward, his hands gripping the reins, staring straight down, trying to ignore everything and wishing nobody would look at him in the middle of the night. Or open the windows to their homes because, well, Cedric's body had begun to stink. Marcus tried not to breathe through his nose, but every bump made the cart creak and the corpse jostle, releasing another waft of the smell of the dead, right when he took a breath. If not for the situation, he would be dancing right now, as it was one of the people in the ledger that he knew about and actually feared. And he was dead. Many of the local ghosts were probably already partying. Let's get this over with, and I will indeed dance with you all, he told himself, raising his head as the road smoothed out, notifying him that he had finally reached the city lord's residence and the road leading up to it. Halt! One of the guards before the gate yelled, holding a bright lantern in his hand. State your business or turn around. I know it's late, but... He climbed down slowly, reached into his coat, and handed over the wax-sealed scroll he'd prepared, detailing who he was, making sure the city lord would know he was one of his subordinated. This is something that can't wait until sunrise. You must give this to City Lord Edron Valcroft. We will decide that. The guard snorted, yanking it out of his hand and breaking the seal, eyes flicking back and forth as he read. The moment he finished, a slow exhale followed from his lungs, his voice becoming much more sober. That's what I think it is. It is, Marcus muttered. Because if it's not, then he has a twin we didn't know about. The guard didn't laugh, but gave the human-shaped cargo one more look. Wait here. The gates opened just enough to admit him while Marcus was made to wait. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then, after an eternity, someone, a much more gruff-looking man, finally came out with the guard, walking up to the cart and yanking the cover free of the body. The man didn't even flinch when the dead Cedric's pale face looked up at him. Instead, he reached out, turning the head around, examining it. And, to Marcus's surprise, the new arrival began grinning. It is him. Motherfucker. Finally bit the dust, eh? The newcomer began laughing, eventually looking at Marcus. Come in. The city lord will indeed want to hear about this. They didn't take him to the front hall this time. Instead, the wagon was escorted around the back and into a side courtyard, lit by angular lanterns and guarded on all sides, even in the dead of the night. After unloading the cargo, the guards formed a square perimeter, their silence making Marcus gulp, feeling he was in trouble. Leave the body in the center, a voice said from the entryway, and when Marcus turned, he watched as Valcroft walked out, adjusting the robe around his body, probably having been woken up from his sleep not long ago. After examining the body, walking around it, but never touching the corpse, the city lord finally looked at Marcus and smiled. And here I thought you were bringing me false news, he muttered, making Marcus flinch. Did I ever do that, my lord? Marcus asked, bowing. No. Valcroft nodded immediately. You did not. Marcus almost felt his jaw drop. This was news, so much bigger news than the dead body in the center. This meant that Auriel's information about an elven artifact bore results. What type of results? Marcus couldn't tell, but just that one answer from Valcroft told him enough. The city lord followed the clues and found something. You know what this means? Valcroft asked, bringing him back to reality. The one who killed him told me a few ideas. Oh? Valcroft raised an eyebrow. Humor me. He said it means the Ledger's paranoia could be raised to a new level. Indeed, Valcroft's smile was approval enough for the plan. Fear is a weapon, and I intend to use it against them. It was time they experienced what it's like to be on the other end of it. Speaking of the source, the one who killed him, is it the same person who sent you to me with the rumors of the artifact? It is the same. Marcus nodded, knowing it was no time to try to lie or hide things. Valcroft nodded, examining his face. You made an interesting and powerful friend. Should I be concerned? He asked, still smiling, but it didn't feel like a joke. Not for Marcus, not at that moment. No, my lord, he... Relax. Valcroft raised a hand. Someone who gives out information about something like what you brought for me, then gifts me another weapon. He muttered, looking at Cedric's body. I have been in the business for many decades now. I can recognize an offering when I see one. It is not a bad idea to have a friend like your source. Silverhaven is a passive entity, but that also means I could not rely on them. But one who is as active as yours. I do have a good feeling about our future endeavors. Chapter 67. Pandemonium. The Crimson Ledger, in the eyes of Velgrada's people, was a monolith. In the eyes of Valcroft, it was more like a hydra. They had their hand in dozens of local businesses, owning them, buying them out, or forcing them to become part of the ledger. They may have retained their original owners and workers, but the true management and direction came from the ledger thereafter. But that hydra was now looking very juicy and vulnerable. Of course, Valcroft wasn't someone who had let them grow freely, as he gathered his own allies, helping businesses remain independent and preventing the ledger from absolving everybody. But it was a battle fought with money and influence for years. On the surface, that is. Under it, there were some accidents where people fell, and caravans were raided outside the city limits, but nothing could be traced back to either the city lord or to the ledger. But one of the heads of this damned hydra was off its neck, and it was time to grow back, so he was ready to strike again. And this raid, no matter how high Cedric sat, wouldn't be different either from their previous acts. Untraceable. As Valcroft would ensure, the message he sent would be interpreted just the right way. It began with his absence. At first, it wasn't weird that Cedric hadn't returned to the headquarters for days. It happened more than once already, but missing for a week without any notice. That was getting unusual. At first, no one questioned it. Maybe he was given a mission, many thought, one that he had gone off alone, as he often did, grim-faced and tight-lipped, doing the Ledger's dirty work. That was his job, after all, to be the Ledger's blunt instrument. But even then he usually sent back reports. Yet now he didn't check in, he didn't ask permission to proceed, and he was silent. The 8 days came and went. No contacts, no sightings, and not even whispers on the street about his whereabouts. Still, the members didn't go for Garrick to ask for answers, as at first, the assumption was that he'd gone to ground, perhaps tailing someone from the City Lord's retinue, or Silverhaven itself. But the latter felt unreasonable. Who would tail someone from there? Garrick wouldn't even let him do something stupid like that. Unless he didn't ask for permission. Was Cedric that stupid? Did he go after Silverhaven? The fear started to grow its roots even deeper now in the heads of the top branch of the Ledger, and there was no stopping it now. It was amongst the growing paranoia that, at a meeting in the smoke-filled chambers of their own establishment, the Iron Veil Tavern, the main council of the Ledger convened. Ivessa had called it there, wanting to meet somewhere more public, as she realized the long absence of the Ledger's top brass from public view, along with the still-running whispers, was significantly hurting their reputation. There were even rumors of previously absorbed companies thinking about a chance to break free again. And without Cedric, there was nobody qualified enough to get sacked on them like a rabid dog. Nobody had his reputation after all. "I told you," Orlin hissed in panic as they began their meeting, a silver coin, the one he had earned for the first time in his life, kept as a lucky charm, flipping endlessly through his fingers. He bounced. That bastard. He left the city escaping the storm. Doesn't that mean something to any of you? "Calm down," Garrick grunted, still acting as the leader of the Ledger, though his voice lacked its usual bite. The big man was seated at the head of the long table, of course, arms folded, staring down at the untouched whiskey in front of him. He's vanished like this before. Well, not like this, but it's not the first time. He will be back. I think this is different," Ivessa said quietly, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose while her eyes flicked between them all. "Cedric isn't answering any of his codes. I tried. I went to all of his hideouts, and they are cold. Worst of it all, I checked his belongings. Nothing is missing, and nothing suggests he went out of town. That isn't like him." "It could be nothing," Rickard offered from his corner, sweat glistening along his brow despite the chill in the room, probably because deep down he was just as nervous as Orlin. Maybe he got sick. Injured? Please. Ivessa gave him a look like he'd just suggested Cedric had gone off to join a monastery or become a saint of beggars. "He's dead," Maris exclaimed bluntly as she sat at the edge of the table, her arms crossed, her brows twitching with anger. "Or close to it. You all know it. This silence means he got captured, tortured, or killed. Maybe in this order. We must prepare for the worst." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke because everyone thought the Silverhaven thing was over. Or was it, if it wasn't, all of this because of a beggar kid? Really? How can that be? No. This had to be different. It couldn't be that. It couldn't be Silverhaven. If, Garrick finally broke the silence with a long exhale, reaching for his whiskey, if he's dead, then we have a bigger problem. Because of the Silverhaven theory, Ivessa finished for him, adding the word theory to make sure nobody gets into a fit, especially not in public. Maybe this was a bad idea to hold it here. "This is it," Orlin whispered, burying his head in his palms. "This is how they work. Slow, precise, deadly, a cat playing with its prey. They made him vanish. Next, it'll be us, one by one. Like, I have been going home, expecting a knife in my back at every turn in the house. Fuck." "Stop yelling, you fucking coward," Mary sneered at him. "Pull yourself together." but even she looked unsettled under her sneering grimace. Still, Auriel listened, and the meeting kept happening, in silence once more. At the end of the night, new orders were given, and every possible spy of the ledger was deployed. They activated every contact they had in Velgrada, be it city guards, brothel madams, crooked merchants, or even the urchins they looked down upon, who were beginning to be paid in actual coin instead of stale bread. All were given the same instruction: find Cedric. That part was a mistake, because the moment kids got involved, it also allowed Auriel to learn about their panic. However, he did nothing, instead concentrating solely on his recovery. What he was happy about was the fact that the city lord knew how to stretch the rubber string to its snapping point, balancing it perfectly, allowing the ledger to fester in their own fears. As for the ledger's dismay, there was still nothing. No sightings, nobody, not even a whisper. Well, until a particular package arrived on the 10th day, straight to their headquarters. It was Ricard who was there that day, and it was he who opened it. It was late at night, and he was bleary-eyed and half-drunk, fighting his own demons as he stumbled back to the ledger's main gate, afraid to go back home just yet. Then he noticed it. At first, he thought someone had simply dropped off a message or a packet, an offering. It wasn't rare at all. Rubbing his eyes, he watched the thick wooden box, sealed with dark wax and tied shut with a loop of braided silver cord. Fuck. Stay still, ground. What the fuck is this? He stumbled forward, belching on his way to it, and then broke the seal with a grunt, annoyed that no one had already dealt with it. The moment he opened it, he immediately sobered up as he screamed all the alcohol out of his blood. And the reason was simple. Cedric's head was inside. Its mouth was half open, the skin discolored, eyes glassy and lifeless, already flowing out of their sockets. Yet despite the state of the head, the smell, the horror, it was Cedric. The worst thing was that there was no blood in the box, but only salt, preserving the head to remain identifiable. The entire headquarters of the ledger was locked down within minutes. Guards scoured every window and every entrance, from the roof to the basement, questioning everybody and each other, yet nobody knew who had brought the box to their doors. And that couldn't be. There were guards stationed everywhere, which meant that their own people were being compromised, fueling the panic among them. And it was just the start, because by morning more packages arrived. Ivessa herself found the next one left on the doorstep of her private loft. It was a sealed crate, smaller but heavy. Opening with trembling hands, inside was Cedric's right arm, fingers curled as if still clenching something. As for an added extra effect, wrapped around the wrist was a silver ribbon, tied neatly, as if to show that this was a present, directed at her specifically. For Maris, an identical gift was sent, consisting of the legs, folded into a long crate and arranged neatly next to each other. The third was sent to Auriel, and he received Cedric's junk and teeth. The latter was even made into a bracelet, holding the former together. As for Ricard, he got Cedric's left hand, with the middle finger raised, pointed directly at him when he opened the crate. Lastly, for Garrick, oddly enough, there was nothing. Well, what he got was that he had to deal with the immediate effect. Complete chaos. Each leader thought they were next, and now not-so-quiet whispers erupted among the lower ranks, their subordinates fanning rumors of a ghost killer or maybe killers, working for Silverhaven, ruthless assassins sent to wipe them out. Some of their members even fled the city, vanishing entirely, or they went to ground in the outlands or paid smugglers to smuggle them out of Velgrada by any means necessary, while those who couldn't have barricaded themselves in their homes. In the middle of this new pandemonium, Garrick summoned the core members again, this time behind locked doors, with a dozen guards outside the chamber and windows. Someone is trying to dismantle us, piece by piece. You think? Auriel snapped, his eyes wide with massive black bags under them, his finger twitching again and again. Fuck. How did we come to this? Didn't we have enough? Calm down, Garrick growled, but it wasn't working anymore. Calm? Mary slammed a fist on the table, failing to hold up her usual act. Things were getting to her. They know where we sleep, Garrick. They're taunting us. If this isn't Silverhaven, then someone wants us to think it is. But that's just ridiculous. That's impossible, Ivessa murmured, because it means that Silverhaven doesn't punish them, which then would also mean they are working with them, which means they are indeed behind it, in a roundabout way. We need to respond, Rickard said, his voice oddly firm for once. We need to hit back. We can't go down like this. Let's kill someone, anyone. Let the city know we're not weak. What? Orlean spat. What the fuck are you on about? Kill who? Ivessa moaned, pulling on her face with her fingers. A rash move, especially in public, is something so stupid, I want to kill you for mentioning it. Enough. Garrick stood, slamming both hands down on the table, puffing air through his nose. I will not have this spiral go any further. We built this network with blood and gold. We will not be unmade by rotting flesh and salt. His eyes swept across the room, looking at everybody. We doubled the guards, and for now we strike no new deals. We must screen ourselves. He paused, his jaw moving, chewing on the inside of his lips. We had grown too big, and we need to shave off the fat. Even if he said that, that was already happening. People were leaving, openly defying their previously ironclad hold and rules. Things were fracturing. Way too fast, but he wasn't going to give up. He may have to forge the fact that he replaces Valcroft, at least for now, but he will not let the ledger fall apart. After that, Garrick continued in a grim tone, we will still do some killing of our own. Who? Marys asked as everyone looked at him. Every small business that is working for Valcroft. Garrick added, we can't just back down without stinging him first. He muttered, and deep down he knew he was saying it for one simple animalistic reason. He wanted to feel bad about losing this time. He wanted to see Valcroft bleed a little. Chapter 68, An Injured Crow. It was a good day, a fine day. Valcroft stood alone, smiling, looking through the window glass of his private wing, a small cup of steaming black tea in his hand. The sun was about to peak above the horizon, and the barely alive candlelight danced across the fine porcelain, making him enjoy this moment even more. It was the feeling of being in control and of inevitable victory. He often came here in the early hours before dawn, especially when he knew he would enjoy the coming day. There is no way to recover from this, he muttered, taking a sip, giggling like a kid. And he was right. After breakfast, he was stealthily informed that throughout the night 2 people had arrived in secret, wishing to meet with the city lord. As for why, Valcroft didn't need to ask. It was pretty obvious. They were the first rats, leaving the sinking ship of the ledger. Would he employ them, protect them? Of course not. But he would offer a haven for now. The quicker the ledger disappears, the better. So, in line with that, he let them wait for another hour before summoning them to his office. Sandwiched between guards, 2 men entered. The first wore a trader's cloak, while the other, a thinner, older-looking man, bore the appearance of a bureaucrat who had lost weight due to stress, as evidenced by the loose skin around his neck. Interesting. It seemed that one of them was probably part of the bookkeeping for the ledger. At least that was the feeling Valcroft got from him. Seeing the scrutinizing eye of the city lord, both stopped at the threshold of his desk, and both of them bowed low, almost headbutting the top of the dark red table. I know your plight, Valcroft spoke before they could. Your names are not important yet, nor are your allegiances. He took a sip of his freshly made tea. What matters is whether you have something worth my time. Because, as far as I am concerned, you are still my enemies. The trader was the first to speak, finding his voice, stopping it from trembling. My lord, there are many of us. We were unwilling partners of the ledger, minor agents who are forced into their service by debt or pressure. I swear on my family's bloodline, we were never loyal to them. We only want to leave and protection, Valcroft finished for him, waving a hand. Or rather, the promise of it. No need to use flowery language, get to the point. The older man nodded slowly, licking his lips, taking over the conversation. The Crimson Ledger is unraveling. Everyone knows it. Cedric's death was the first big block falling. And even if they want to deny it, everyone knows by now. I worked the numbers for the subordinate factions for, a long time. he continued, skipping over the number of years he worked for them and the losses in revenue. Just because of the fear within the system is enormous. Every 3 contracts out of 5 were cancelled because nobody wants to get into bed with someone who probably angered Silverhaven. And it is getting worse. Listening to them, Valcroft's eyes thinned a little, but he made no sound. He just listened, and after they finished, he leaned back in his chair, running his finger around the edge of his cup, playing with it. "And what do you want from me?" "We just," the trader said, exchanging a glance with the old man, "an understanding. If we break away from the ledger, we would like to be protected, and we can provide the city with everything we have on them." Valcroft's fingers tapped once against the table as his eyes sharpened. "Demands? They have demands? Really?" It seems that serving under the ledger had dulled their minds. "And if I were to do this, what then do you offer me?" The men exchanged glances, not understanding what was happening. They just said it. With a bit of hesitation, the older one stepped forward. Names, schedules, hidden accounts. A full list of the properties the ledger secretly owns. Valcroft folded his hands before him, looking contemplative. "That sounds valuable." "It is." The trader also dared a step closer, not registering the slight mocking tone in his voice. "We know you have always preferred balance over chaos, my lord. You never moved against the ledger directly because a full war would shatter the city's order. But now, they are breaking from within. You only need to pick up the pieces, and we can provide those." "Pathetic." Valcroft chuckled softly. "You mistake my patience for inaction. What you are offering is not something I need," he said, waving it all away, shocking the two. "The ledger is falling apart, and it is no longer critical for me to step in. Now, if you had come to me with this earlier, when the situation was different, I would have protected you. But now? Really? Please." "But," they trembled. "I said no." He snapped at them, his expression cold. "But," then he turned amicable, letting his words fall away, and the silence dragged just long enough for deep, sinking fear to creep into their minds. "Leave the documents you've brought with you and keep sending me fresh reports. Return to your shops, your offices, and your ledgers, no pun intended, and provide me with constant updates. Bring in others too, and if I am satisfied with the efforts to atone your roles inside the ledger, I may accept your surrender at the end of it all." Guards, the two knew there was nothing they could do, so they simply bowed again. The older one looked as though he might say more, but thought better of it, gulping back his words as they were led away by the armed warriors. When they were gone, Valcroft stared into his tea, seeing himself smiling back at him. He did not need to strike, at least not yet. Cedric's death had done more than a dozen assassinations might have, and there were still more advantages that he must enjoy. This was the issue with ruling through fear, he thought. The moment the fist loosens, the moment cracks show, everything will start falling apart. He just had to wait, not indefinitely, but just enough for the ledger's assets to fall apart on their own. Until then, he would not intervene. Not publicly, at least. He would be the unmoving stone while the tide tore down the sandcastles around him. Exactly how fate had wanted it. And when the waters receded, he would see which survivors came crawling out from the ruins, begging for his mercy. Then and only then would he decide who deserved it. Until that day, he had another much more important thing to focus on. Below Velgrada, beneath the estate of the city lord, Valcroft was walking through a dark stone corridor, a level deeper than where the sewers ran. His left hand held a simple oil lamp, while he kept the other behind his back, his mind already forgetting all about the crimson ledger as he arrived at a windowless dark cell. In there, a body of a man was hung up by his wrists, chains biting into his pale, dirty skin, holding him upright even though he had no strength for it. One of his eyes remained half-lidded even when the city lord's lamp shone light on him, while the other was utterly gone, only leaving an empty socket behind. His hair had stuck together in big clumps, wild, unkempt and greasy, and his beard had the uneven look of someone who tried to tear it out during a fit, which may have indeed happened. He looked up only when the city lord finally called his name, entering the cell. "Let's talk again." Kravik. Water, he said, his voice barely audible, tired and damaged. Please. Sure. Valcroft smiled, slowly walking up to him and pouring water, not into his mouth, but on his head, watching as Kravik, without a shred of dignity, tried to lick it off from his face as it trickled down to the stone floor. Geez, you look worse every day, Valcroft said in an amused tone. I know. Kravik laughed, or tried to, but it came out as a hacking cough, and something wet hit the stone beneath him. I couldn't tell why, though. I just took a shower, my lord. Still quippy, Valcroft regarded him for a long, quiet moment. I just can't tell if I can trust your words or not. It is a you issue. Kravik's head tilted, gazing at him. Either let me go, or just end it already. I have had enough. Yes, I can see that. And believe me or not, I think you did have enough. But before the final decision, tell me again, the City Lord said finally, stepping just close enough for his silhouette to loom over the chained man. Everything about Risa and the artifact. If your tale holds up again, if there are no cracks of lies in it, I may consider your release, so to speak. Whatever. Kravik's throat moved as he swallowed something thick. He didn't care anymore. Dying was preferable. As I said, she was ready for everything, he whispered. Tzik. Poor Auriel. But at least he died before being betrayed. Same as Aika, Luiet, Orsin, Makan. I don't care about your scum friends. Valcroft interrupted him. The details I need are about what happened to the artifact. Let me remember those I called family, you fuck. He spat again, and a shudder ran through him. The crows fell apart. My family. Something you would not understand. After our victory, Risa took the artifact, and we scattered. She was supposed to cover our tracks, and we were about to regroup at our hideout. We were supposed to arrive one by one, making sure we are not followed. Kravik's lips trembled, speaking, what we couldn't guess, that it was so she could kill us. One by one. The moment I entered, I took a bolt to the face. Thought I was dead. That's what saved me because she thought so too. I knew it had gone into my eye, so I didn't move. I just lay there, letting her drag me into the pile, put away with the bodies of the others around me. He chuckled, and it was not a sane sound. She didn't even hesitate, not once. Gods, we were family. I thought we were a family. And she killed everyone. You were a gang, Valcroft corrected coldly. Scum. Maybe. But your type is a bigger scum, you sick fuck, Kravik snapped at him, unafraid of any consequence. We shared more than just food or bed, which you only do with the prostitutes you invite into your fucking mansion. Surprisingly, Valcroft didn't stop him, nor did he reprimand the man at all. The City Lord simply studied Kravik not with pity, but with cold calculation, considering everything. His tone, the tensing muscles, the flickering light in his one eye. He read everything, and he compared it to all he knew. Everything he collected, even things Kravik had no knowledge of. Where would she run to? Valcroft asked. Fuck me. Kravik shook his head slowly. No idea, but she had places. Old drop points, maybe. Hideouts from before she met us. There was a cabin in the Briarwoods, north of the Watchtower ruins, eastward of Corvar, and the Salt Caves near the Eastern Hollow, down south. Gods, she liked high places too. Abandoned towers, crumbling forts, wherever crows perched. She always liked looking down on things. And if she hid the artifact, which place would be the most ideal for that? Kravik looked up at him, considering his words. She'd put it somewhere nobody could steal it, and somewhere she could watch it, protect it, until the heat dies down. I'd wager it would be close to the Salt Caves. There are many good hiding spots along the dozen old and more than a dozen current mines. Valcroft already knew that part, and Kravik's guesses were now only confirmations. It confirmed the trail he was on, and from which the City Lord learned that this Risa was already in Silverhaven custody. She'd be interrogated, eventually, which meant that there was still time to find the artifact before Silverhaven. He had already learned that this woman had not only eliminated her gang, but also her actual family, choosing the artifact over everything before escaping. She was ruthless, beyond imagination, which meant that maybe even Silverhaven will have a hard time cracking a madwoman like her. You have been honest, Valcroft said, turning away, already going over in his mind which possible hideout he will visit first. That will keep you alive. For now? Kravik snorted. Just end me already. Perhaps later. He chuckled. I may still need you. Although, I will send someone to escort you to a room and begin taking care of you, as a reward. By then, Valcroft reached the door to the cell, and Kravik's voice stopped him at the last moment. If you find her, he said, don't let her talk. Don't let her lie to you. She lies with her eyes closed too. Just kill her. I don't need her to speak, he said with a crooked smile. Only what she took. If it eases your mind, she probably won't live for long. Chapter 69. Being Nice. The sun was already up by the time I strolled through the heavy doors of the Adventurers Guild. The air inside was just as before, and I felt like I hadn't been in here for years, even though it was only a few weeks. I was still feeling sore here and there, with bandages under my clothing, but I was more or less recovered, having rested for almost 10 days straight. Joran spotted me immediately, welcoming me as I walked up to his booth. Noticing my posture, I could tell by the way his eyes scanned me that he caught that I was injured. Badly. And that I was still recovering. Look who's finally walking in here again after disappearing for so long, he called from behind his desk, smiling, his quill still scratching across a mission ledger. You look like you had some rough days behind you, huh? Honeymoon or... Let's say honeymoon, I chuckled, sauntering over and leaning on the counter. I'm not really here to talk about what happened, if it isn't an issue. No argument there, he muttered, sipping from his mug, tasting the still hot tea inside. Are you here for some work or... Work, I said simply, nodding my head. Huh, that's quick. But sure. Thanks, I need some cash because I pretty much ran out of it, I said with a half smile. And Lyra's working, but what kind of man am I if she is the breadwinner? Isn't she a baker? Touché, I laughed, seeing that he had no idea what that word meant. So, is there anything I can do? He squinted at me for a second longer than usual. Joran wasn't dumb. He had been around for too long, seen too many adventurers recovering from injuries, and could tell that whatever happened was serious. But I was through it, and so he didn't press further. Well, whatever you're confident with doing, you can start whenever you are ready. There is always chaos at the back, so any help is appreciated. Sure thing, I chuckled, happy that I was such a regular with such a history of perfect work ethic that there were no questions about my intentions. We exchanged small talk for a few more minutes before someone else called for him. He grumbled and waved me off, and I slipped behind the side hall toward the records room. Finally, it was time for the real work I came here to do. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and just as I expected, it was still empty. Perfect. I'd been helping out here for a while when I first signed up for a part-time job. It was something nobody wanted to do, as it was tedious and the worst kind of task, copying, sorting, organizing. Amongst the clerks in the guild, at least in this city, none of them wanted to do this, except if it was a punishment or their turn to do it. Whenever one of them saw me here, they always let me work in peace, and more importantly, it gave me access to the board registry. No questions asked. On the surface, the guild ran clean and smoothly. Missions were posted by request, then ranked by the board, and subsequently reviewed by a peer of that board. Then it would go live, taken by people, completed, and a proof presented. All that jazz, and then end up being paid out based on the results. But like any bureaucracy, the real game was in the margins. Because when a mission was posted, the reward for it also had to be put up front. And I knew how to play margins. Back in my previous life, which still felt weird to say out in my mind, I was studying to be an accountant. Not that it was my dream, as I wasn't always someone who wanted to be an office worker. I wanted to do more than that, but thanks to always getting swamped with tasks. And me being spineless, I never became anything really. When I was training after school, I was never a flashy one either, nor was I the corrupt one who embezzled millions or bought yachts. Just the quiet, reliable type who kept companies from collapsing under their own weight and prevented mismanagement. When I began my career, I'd also worked for firms that skimmed off the top. I watched as they played games with logistics, shifted funds just enough to disappear things no one wanted traced. I thought that exposing them would further my career, but it had the opposite effect. I was ostracized from a multitude of places and ended up at a dead-end company, where I was assigned projects and tasks, working from numbers to project management, handling whatever came my way, regardless of the task. It was the most boring life possible, but there was a plus side to it now. I knew how to conceal expenses in plain sight, how to pass off fake contracts without triggering alarms. It was all about understanding the flow of information and how to forge documents. As for the guild, it was a paper-based system run by overworked clerks and powered by sheer habit. Easy, it meant I could run circles around it. While thinking about it, I took a seat in the corner and pulled out a small booklet from my coat. In it were my new identities that I had prepared while I was bedridden. 5 of them. So far, that is. All were plausible, none too flashy. One was a one-eyed herbalist named Torvin. Another was a grumpy retired smith who needed resources. Then there was Maril, a frazzled widow with an infestation of cave moths. So on and so on. I kept them varied, scattered around the city and inconsistent, so there should be no links between them. Each one used different paper, different ink, and different handwriting. Looking them over, I dropped them into the submissions pile at odd hours, making sure they weren't coming up after each other. Most importantly, I studied the city's rules and ensured that none of them ever asked for anything illegal. That was the trick. You stay just inside the lines. The materials I requested weren't rare either, and even if an alchemist looked into it, they would need all the postings put together to notice they were ingredients for something. Of course, they were from Lyra's book, as we scoured it for possible recipes that were plausible for her to try, and the elixirs wouldn't be Viagra-based, or too hard to make because they require ingredients that have not gone extinct. What we ended up choosing were double-checked and regionally common as far as our understanding went, but annoying to find without knowing where to look. So we were about to hire adventurers to get them for us. For free. That was the best part of it. I made the missions sound boring and beneath most of the higher-rank adventurers, which meant they landed in the laps of the bronze-rank groups or those desperate for coin. I don't need experienced eyes to start looking into them anyway. When they were out on the field, I simply waited. And sure enough, the results began to come in only a few days. The guild sorted, weighed, priced, and filed them, with the payment coming directly from the guild. Yep. Whenever the guild took missions, there was, of course, a commissioning fee. I just fudged the numbers, skimming from forfeited missions or unclaimed rewards, or I simply falsified the numbers and records. It wasn't hard to obfuscate it and ensure that everything seemed to be happening as expected. Maybe I should have been reincarnated into the ledger. Oh well, this is much more fun, especially because nobody noticed. Because why would they? The mission numbers added up, and the budgets checked out. As long as the shelves didn't look emptier than they should be, no one questioned the missing gold or some adventurers having a higher debt than they remembered having. Too bad, fellas. It was the easiest heist, if I can even call it that, in my life. Whatever Lyra needed, it was coming to me, free of charge, and I didn't even have to go out into the forests, beyond the city limits. Others did that for me. Ha! I should have done this earlier. In barely a week, we had already gathered enough ingredients for Lyra to try and brew something new. Deciding to take a break, not to push it beyond the limit and get busted, I told Joran I was taking a few days off to rest. Of course, he never argued against it, looking worried about my health, making me feel a tiny bit of guilt. So that day, what I was mostly doing before heading home was to make sure all my tracks were covered and that I left no clues behind, connecting me to these fake postings. Outside, the muffled sound of bickering reached me, something about a tab being too high and a missing reward, the usual nonsense. Or maybe my machinations. Hearing it, I let my mind drift while going through the documents. Back in my other life, I'd been good at this. Not the underhanded part, the system part, understanding flows, charts, logistics, numbers, and people. I just never knew how to handle the latter, even when I knew I was used. How could I have been so naive? My tragedy was that nobody wanted to play fair, yet I believed they did. You work your ass off for a company, do the numbers right, and some executive still stabs you in the back because you caught a line item they wanted to hide. Or your co-workers turn on you because you refused to fudge the forecast or took your presentation as their own. Now, though, I understood. If you wanted something, you take it. If the others can't hold on to it, too bad. As I was thinking, a knock interrupted my musings, and I blinked as Joran peeked in, mug in hand. You alive in here, or should I send the clerks to sweep you up? Still alive, I replied, lifting a hand, closing the book and watching as he stepped in and closed the door behind him. You said you were taking a break. Why are you still here? He asked casually. Not that I'm complaining. You work thrice as much as any of the others, but still, rest. Will do my resting, believe me. I nodded. I just finished today's part, so you can't complain I left in the middle of it. You're organizing our backlog like some kind of masochist. Nobody would blame you if you left it halfway done, kid. Nah, I shrugged. I like it. You sure you're okay, in the head? He asked, still looking at me. You had us worried for a while, disappearing like that. Sorry, I met his gaze and smiled. I'm fine now, really. In the end, he nodded, accepting it. But that's what made him dangerous in a way, because Joran didn't really pry into things, but he listened. I know that he filed many things away, something that made him more reliable than most, but it also meant I had to be careful about what I let slip. I saw him repeat words back to adventurers who tried to pull some amateur shit. He was good. He would catch any lie, so I made sure to always be honest with him. And if I had to, I would only lie by omission, not directly. That was the safest method. One day you're going to tell me what you're really up to, Auriel. One day, I echoed, nodding, keeping up my smile. When he left, I sat there in silence for a while, watching the light move across the floor. In my old life, I'd been nothing. Just a cog like Joran was in the guild. An honest cog. A hard-working one. But still, a replaceable piece of machinery. I wasn't going to be that ever again. If anything, I will own the machine and the gears inside of it. Chapter 70, Partnership. The knock came late, long after the bakery had gone quiet, and I won't lie, the noise startled me. For a moment I thought another assassin had come or something. The lamps were out, but the shutters drawn in so nobody would slip in without us hearing it first. And an assassin wouldn't knock. So I quickly calmed myself down. Moving, I noticed that Lyra was already looking down from the stairwell, making me shake my head, telling her it should be fine with a glance as I walked up to the door and opened it. Marcus. I nodded, recognizing his face, while I stepped aside as I let him in. Maybe he was just as nervous, as he kept glancing at the shadows, making sure nobody was following him before finally neutering. You'll think me mad for coming at this hour, Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper even when I closed the door, but I've been summoned. When I went to ask what the city lord wants from me. What? I asked, seeing him fall silent, watching as Lyra also walked down with a candle and brought a pair of mugs filled with hot tea before us. A favor? A nasty one? Well, a favor, yes. He wants Shade. I mean, he told me to find him and ask him to visit him. He wants to talk with him, one-on-one. Oh, well, that was unexpected, yet not. I just didn't think he would be interested in me this soon. I barely made any headway in the city's life, except killing Cedric. He told me plainly, Marcus pressed on, seeing I remained silent. If Shade wants to actually stay in his city and operate under his blessings, then Shade will have to meet with him. If not, then... He trailed off, and his shoulders sagged once again. You know how this is. I cannot refuse him, Auriel. Not now. He has given me protection. He has made Varen and Sons his partners. If I tell him I can't bring Shade, I will be stripped of both and probably thrown to the ledger. As for you... I know. I folded my arms. So here we are, I murmured, chewing on my lip. Look. His eyes flickered, thinking I wasn't going to make this happen. Quite the opposite, I was thinking of how I should make this happen. You know Shade better than anyone. If there's a way to reach him... There is, I cut him off with a wave of my hand. But listen carefully, Marcus. Shade will never meet anyone, not even the city lord. The moment I said it, he visibly deflated. Not even I know who he is. That is not how we communicate. I continued, building a colorful background. I am just one of his subordinates. His hand he placed here, his appointed agent. That's all. So if anything I can do is to go to the city lord myself. You… Marcus blinked, and for a moment relief passed across his face, followed quickly by unease. Can you make decisions in his stead? Yes, I said simply. That is the only way he will speak to Valcroft, through me. I see. Marcus exhaled, closing his eyes and going over everything in his head. Then I will tell him. I do hope he understands. And if he does, God's Auriel, you have saved me again. He looked at me with a mix of respect and a slight fear somewhere behind his eyes. It was there since he realized I killed a gold-ranked adventurer. It was an interesting thing to see, and a bit amusing now, because he would never have guessed that I was the very person he was asking for. Of course, I wasn't going to meet Valcroft immediately. I told Marcus that I will make it so that I can go in 3 days. After I got my instructions from Shade, that is. If I just waltz in there, that would be a horrible idea, because they would put it together, that it was only me, or think I had no actual authority, and try to undermine everything. So I played it slow, and when I arrived it was, once again, the middle of the night. No fanfare, no great welcoming, just me walking over to the city lord's manor by myself. I wore only a plain black hood drawn low, the picture of a Sith master, not that they would get the reference. But it made me chuckle multiple times whenever I saw my reflection. The amusing thing was that the guards didn't ask questions when I told them I was sent here by Marcus Varen. They simply let me inside, guiding me to the manor. I should have waved my hand in a gesture and told them I'm here to see Jabba. I wonder if they would be flabbergasted. Whatever. Inside, the marble floors reflected the many candlelights from the chandelier above the main hall. Wherever I looked, tall windows stretched like the bars of a cage, filled with colored mosaics that depicted some heroic acts from either a tale or the city lord's past. I was unsure. Not that it mattered. As I was led forward, Valcroft awaited me in the great hall, seated at a long table, empty save for a decanter of dark wine. I don't know if it was intentional, but stepping in, I could tell that his presence filled the room more than the guards standing at the walls. He looked and felt powerful. I could tell that he was stronger than Cedric if it came to a fight. "My dear guest, Auriel, is it not?" Valcroft said smoothly, gesturing for me to sit, while I nodded, pulling the hood back. I knew Marcus had told him enough that I didn't need to introduce myself. "Please, sit. And I do wish to say that Velgrada owes your master many thanks. It was his decision to interfere." I inclined my head and took the seat opposite. "My master desires nothing but the stability of the city. Disorder is bad for business." "That we agree on," Valcroft smiled thinly. "Still, he has brought me both a gift and a bit of chaos." "A bit, maybe," I countered, not wanting to let him probe the boundaries, and I wasn't showing any fear towards him or his words. "But it is nothing but temporary. Better than a war for succession." "It is a fact," he nodded. "The Crimson Ledger can no longer pose any threat, and by how things are developing, they will fall apart by the end of the year. Not to mention, most of them will willingly put their fate into my hands. So once again, your master has given me much. It is customary to bring guests to the owner of the house that we are visiting," I answered with a smile, reaching out and pouring wine for myself without asking for permission. "Visiting?" He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "I was of the belief you were here to stay." "A possibility," I answered calmly, "if the homeowner doesn't mind our presence." "Not at all," he chuckled, raising his own glass towards me as we began drinking, "as long as we are following the rules. And I believe I can trust that you will do so. I just have some questions. Please ask away. I am here to clear any and all confusion the city lord may have." I smiled back at him, tasting the wine, which was rich, super rich, the best one I had ever drank. I just hoped there was no weirdness in it. Truth serum or something similar. Oh well. I was gambling, and it was time to go all in. Why my city? Coincidence. I answered instantly. My master had a different life that he decided was boring him. He abandoned it and found himself here, with the challenge to start over from zero, to feel alive again. I lied, partially mixing in my actual situation. Half-truths always lend things a greater sense of believability. I see, the city lord muttered, and I could read that he wasn't doubting it. Hell. I could see it in his eyes that there was a sudden understanding, and well, a misunderstanding in it. Does he think Shade is someone very powerful? Not that I am complaining. His interest is not power, I continued, that he had and has. His interest is in the challenge itself. Power, Valcroft murmured, leaning back, like the power of an elven artifact. It's just an artifact, I replied, making his eyes flash, and probably because I was ignorant of what that word really means in this world. He read it as if I were handling it as a trivial item. Phew. Thank you, Reincarnation. I just hope it is not a one-ring type artifact we are talking about. Can I ask how much he really knows about it? A test? Always a test? Sure. Let's see. He knows enough, I stated calmly. Information is not free, City Lord, I added, and before he could say anything, I began laying it out. It started away from Velgrada. There was a merchant caravan smuggling the item, one that fell to beastmen in the wilds near the city of Corvar. I can't imagine what the Corvinate kingdom would do if they knew what they missed out on. They are one of the greatest enemies of the nearby elven gatherings. Oh, really? Good to know. Of course, I made sure my face didn't change, and I just continued speaking. The elves hired the beastmen to take back what was stolen from them, I added confidently, but then they were attacked by the Crows, a local gang, because they encroached on their territory of smuggling operations. So, the artifact, by pure chance, landed in their hands. Too bad the Adventurers Guild has just as good information brokers. I smiled, making Valcroft's eye twitch. You, he asked, making me shrug. Velgrada was not the first city I was trying to establish a foothold in. I shrugged, but the gold-ranked leaders in Corvar were not like your esteemed self, City Lord Valcroft. They wanted it for themselves, yes, but they honored none of the deals we made in the process. That's why we aren't in contact with the Adventurers Guilds at the moment. I heard that 2 of them went missing. You mean to say the Crows killed them, albeit paying a big price for it? I corrected him, watching as he nodded his head. Yes, a big price. Valcroft's fingers tapped against his glass, the only sign that he was measuring every word of mine. And these crows. You see, now that I think about it, I heard the name Auriel. It is a common name, but it's mine. I met his gaze without flinching. I knew them. Risa, their leader. Kravik, broad as a wall, brash but a loyal man. Jeren, the knife hand of Risa. Callis, if you need another name, I can continue, I said, describing them until I saw his satisfaction grow. And my questions deepen. How did he learn of them? I could see that he was already aware of this. He had a source. Who? Did someone from the Crows talk to him? I had no other possible ideas. Tisk, remain calm, Auriel. Play it coolly. But as I said, City Lord, information is expensive, even if you already know the contents of it. I finished, cutting my explanation off. For the first time, Valcroft's expression shifted, the faintest curve of honest, actual interest showing at the edge of his mouth, smiling not because it was the polite thing to do, but because he liked our conversation. Reaching out, he poured himself a second glass of wine, sipping on it. Of course, I grew up as a businessman, even if it doesn't seem that way. I am more than happy to deal with you and your master, through you. Likewise. I tipped my glass towards him before also taking a sip. If there is one thing that I never really had, Valcroft began after he studied me for a long moment, it is a reliable source of information. Otherwise, I would have caught the ledger before it grew so big that I couldn't do anything about it in time. As a man, I acknowledge my shortcomings. And let's be honest, Silverhaven doesn't deal it, not even if asked with gold clinking on the table. Then he paused, but kept looking at me. Let me pay you now with something your master likes the most. Information. That one of the crows I named still lives, I asked, and I could give myself a high five. His expression of shock. Ha! Bingo! I knew it. Of course, I kept my breathing even and my body still, but inside I was trying to think who it might be. I needed to get the guy and get them out from the city lord's view. I just hoped they didn't tell much about me, or this could fall apart. Ugh. Fuck. Yes. Valcroft nodded, and I could see how surprised he was, doing his best to keep control of his emotions. Kravik, he said slowly, he survived when the rest of the gang was massacred. When I found him, he was scarred, broken, but alive, and he is mine now. Every instinct in me demanded a reaction, but I gave him none. Not a twitch, not a breath, just keep sitting, drinking wine. But I guess you also know this, Valcroft chuckled faintly, shaking his head. Shade's knowledge is vast. I just hope that in our future dealings, he will think of me fondly. We always respond in kind, I smiled, finishing my second glass. Well then, please, tell me, he leaned forward, how shall Velgrada repay Shade? I can see now that information is indeed your mastery, so I won't make a fool out of myself a second time. What does Shade want as payment? Gold? Influence? A place in my court? Ears that I allow to listen to our decision-making? Or are they already within my walls? I let a beat of silence pass, then shook my head. Shade asks for none of those. Please be assured, your people have not been infiltrated by us. The only such individual is Marcus Veron. As he was the first we chose to make contact with, we are still small. Oh? Valcroft's eyes gleamed, and I don't think he believed me, fully. Then what does he ask for? Well, I met his gaze, coming to a decision, one thing only. Kravik. The man himself. Valcroft studied me, no longer smiling. This time the silence was long. Almost 10 minutes long. Then, slowly, he inclined his head. I can see the reason. Gathering his old dogs to heal. I said nothing to that, and he would interpret the request however he wished. That was the point, after all. Very well, Valcroft sighed at last. Kravik will be delivered to you. But understand this. No one leaves Velgrada without my knowledge. He knows too much. We do too, I reminded him, making him grin a little, but in a more savage way. But I don't trust this Kravik. If Shade seeks to hide him, if Shade forgets his place, I will know. And I will act. Shade has no reason to cross you, I said, without taking offense. We have the same goals, to strengthen this city, because the better it is for you, the better it is for us. This is a symbiotic relationship, City Lord Valcroft. I liked the sound of it. He gave a single sharp nod, slowly standing up, and I knew the discussion was over. I'll make Kravik presentable, then deliver him to you, and Mr. Auriel. Yes, I asked, standing up, watching as he reached a hand out that I grabbed and shook on. I do hope that we will indeed have a long and prosperous partnership.